So I just come back from a trip to the UK visiting friends and family, and one of the people that I visited was my best friend and his son, who's my godson. He's got really into sort of rock music, so first of all it was like AC/DC, and now he's going through a real Hendrix phase, which is all super cool. I was being shown around their house and saw his bedroom, and there were two guitars propped up there. The first one was just some piece of crap, basically, with bits missing, just like a half size or 3/4 size kind of, catalogue guitar. And the second one was the Yamaha, I think the C40, the classical guitar, which I actually sort of advised his parents to get as a really good instrument for learning the rudiments of guitar. But it ain't the instrument for getting your Jimmy on or your Angus. So I said, leave that one with me. I'll sort something out. In all honesty, the budget is tight for this one. Maybe it's me that's tight. I sort of got thinking, what's the best guitar that I can make for the least money that will still be an awesome guitar, is not going to have the sort of traits that are the worst thing to have in a learner guitar, like they don't stay in tune or the nut binds, those things you really want to avoid because you don't want the instrument to fight the emergent guitarist, right? So how am I going to do all of that, and how am I going to keep costs down to a minimum? And I started thinking about all the stuff that I had lying around the shed, and I realised that actually I might just have a guitar's worth of stuff. So the first thing is a body that's a shape that I kind of came up with. It's supposed to be like an offset Strat thing. I don't love it. I'm sort of still refining it, but it's also sort of hard to see what it's going to look like without actually seeing it built into a guitar. So this is actually a really good opportunity to use this up. I also have a bridge for that, which is a hip shot style bridge that I bought in specifically for this project, so that's great. This is just an AliExpress one, but the quality is unbelievable. Sometimes the stuff on AliExpress is, you get what you pay for. Other times you'd be surprised how good the quality is, and it probably comes from the same factory as like the Jinho stuff. There's a factory in Korea that makes even the US Fender machine heads, so don't be hasty in writing that off. Also from there, some machine heads. I didn't realise they were going to have Fender logos on them, and I would certainly never put these on a guitar. A, because the quality is actually not good enough for my guitars, but B, I don't want to kid anyone that they've got Fender tuners when they don't, but they'll be good enough for this guitar. So, bridge body tuners. I just bought an SG that I'm going to do some stuff with. It had a headstock repair and came in with cheap pickups, certainly not Gibson ones. Make it a double humbucker thing, that'll be good for your rock moves. The next thing is, there's a particular neck that I built ages ago. This thing was cursed from the get-go. The first thing I did with this guitar that was a disaster, I made the schoolboy error of taking the routed bit to the end grain, and of course it grabbed it and tore it and chewed it up and stuff, so I had to sort of round that off. It's actually sort of not quite the Fender profile as a result of that. And the next thing that I did was I put a nice maple fretboard on, and I put some pins in there to sort of stop it from sliding around when it glued it on. And of course what I ended up doing was putting the pin in too far, and it came through the back. That was really upsetting. And then after that, I noticed that the back of the neck was splitting around the truss rod anyway, and the reason for that was the truss rod was actually just poking through. I obviously made it too thin, or sunk the truss rod too deep into it, or whatever it was. Anyway, I screwed up. So I've taken this fretboard off, and we're going to use it on a different piece of wood. So enter my next failure of a neck. Is this one here, and it's actually not so much of a failure. It was all right. This was a really flat sawn piece of maple, and when I cut it back and got into the headstock thing, this figuring here came through, which I didn't really care for at all. So I've just had this sitting there. Now, what's interesting is Mr. Paul Reed Smith, who is of course a bit of a god, one of the things that they always talk about is they take at least a month to carve their necks, and there's really good reason for that. So this was a well seasoned bit of maple, and then after I had the issues with it, just decided to put it on hold for a year or maybe even more. if you look there, you can see how much it's bowed back. It's sort of best to like take the material off, let the wood settle to where it wants to be, and then take more wood off again. So that's an interesting example of exactly what can happen. A fretboard is narrower than it needs to be. So what I'm going to do is grab some binding that I ordered from AliExpress, which I actually think is going to look really nice and will just give us a little bit of extra material. Unfortunately, what it does mean is that we're going to have to take these frets out of this fretboard in order to do that. So I think all in all, I think that's going to be a pretty cool guitar, you know, especially if, you know, for a 9-year-old, right? We'll make it super cool. In terms of paint, there's this beautiful Mercedes diamond blue. I did a base to mark the anniversary of my dad's passing because it was the same colour as his first Mercedes that he just absolutely adored, that car. So I decided to do a guitar in that colour, and then someone who I was building a guitar for saw that base and loved the colour so well, their guitar in that colour as well, so I just bought some in. So that's what colour this guitar is going to be. So in terms of bits that I actually need to buy, it's pretty limited. I bought in a truss rod. Basically the channel is already cut for it, so that's cool. There's a neck plate in here and string trees in here. So let's go about it. We'll mark that out. Lovely. Line this all up nicely and put the pins in. Get that nice and parallel there. Put a little 1.5mm nails. That'll do there. I've just put the second pin in, so we're all good to go. What we'll do is we'll get the truss rod in, glue the fretboard, but before we do any of that, what I've actually got to do is straighten out this blank so that the neck is nice and flat. If we just put our level on there, you can see all of this light that we don't want to be seeing here. I don't want to take anything off the headstock end, so what I'm going to do is basically take all the material off the heel end, which is currently sitting at about 1 inch thick. So we've got plenty to lose on there. I think for our purposes that's flat enough. So what I had to do is basically rough out the back so that it was level. Then do the front so it was level. And then I'll do the back again so it's really level. Alright. 23.27 on that side, 23 on that side. So this side is slightly thicker, so we'll just do a bit more planing there. .303 and 23. That'll do us. This guy here is going to have a pre-curved fretboard on, and we want to come in from this side with the rabbiting bit to do the truss rod channel, and that obviously is going to be difficult if your piece is rocking all over the place. Not only difficult, but unbelievably dangerous. So what we need to do is build a jig that basically mounts this like that and has some side rails like that. And then what we can do is basically have a nice flat surface, because we'll be resting on these, and we'll just need to come in with the rabbiting bit. Just got to neaten up this slot here and just increase the depth a little bit. Because of the bow, we had to take a fair bit of material off this end. All right, that's looking pretty good. Obviously it's a little bit rough there, but you've got to bear in mind that you'll never see this. This is the bit we're worried about. And we'll stick this guy in here. And then we'll just get a razor blade and smooth it out. Just make sure we scrape it all off the wood here. Cool, so that's our truss rod in. Alright, so the next thing that we're going to do, now that this is all set in here, is we're just going to tape up over this truss rod, just slightly. And just give it a good application here. Then we use our trusty little glue spreader and make sure we get it all over the place. So now what we do is we take this bit of tape off, and we've got a nice clean truss rod. We'll just stick this guy straight on, like that, and this one like something like that. So we'll just use this bit of the headstock to tie this tubing off with. So we just wrap and wrap and keep wrapping. The clamping force is actually incredibly strong and incredibly even. Okay. So that's been left overnight. Let's take the clamp off and let it do its thing. Let's get these pins out, just throw them away because they're probably bent by now. Alright, that's looking great. I'm very happy with that. And we'll set this up so that the router runs just below the glue line. Okay, so what we've got is a nice binding channel here. I think that's going to look really nice. We had to set the router bit to a depth so that it went over the join between the fretboard and the neck. In doing so, we made this channel too deep for the actual binding. So what we need to do is lose some material off this fretboard, which will actually give us a really nice surface anyway, no marks from the old sort of like frets that we pulled out. The reality is though, we're going to lose some of these dot markers because they're not as deep as we need to remove basically. Now I could sand this off, but it's going to take forever, but we have a nice sharp jointing plane here, number 7, and we're going to do the lion's share with that. And I thought while we're doing it, we might as well put in a compound radius of 10mm to 7¼ and those are actually nice figures. American Standard Strat's 9.5 inch radius, and vintage Fender 7¼ so it'll make it really nice down here for the cowboy chords, nice and comfy, with some good whittle action up here for your lead. Let's just quickly check this. That's looking surprisingly good. And then this one here, not bad. What are we looking at depth-wise now? So it's 4.6 there, 5.6 there, so we actually need to remove a little bit more from this side. 6.2, 6.7, so I need to move a little bit more from this side. But this is why you've got to always check what you're doing when you're going through with this, because it's very easy to just like go way too far and get yourself in a lot of trouble. But let's also see how far off we are with this. So actually, we could almost stop there. Probably need to move a little bit more down the bottom here. Still looking pretty good. So you can see here, I'm really starting to lose these lines now. So I just need to get in there with a fret saw. So we're now going to just use a sanding bar. We're just going to flatten all this off and just really smooth out those imperfections and get the radius exactly right. So again, what we're trying to do is follow the string line here because we're working on a compound radius. If I was working on a fixed radius, like a 9.5 the whole way along, what you'd do is make them sort of, the strokes parallel to the center line, like this. So when you're on the side, you're actually sort of like really only hitting here and just sort of slightly running off this end here due to the taper. Whereas with a compound radius, what we want to be doing is in the middle, we want to be running down the center line, and as you get progressively further out, this tips this way or this way depending on what side of the fretboard you are. So just think, is this the direction that the strings travel? And again, using sort of like planing techniques here. So we've got 2 feet firmly perched on the ground. We're sort of moving our body, keeping our hands nice and steady, and trying not to sort of lean back on the sanding beam when you're sort of back here, because otherwise you'll get, you know, a dip there. Okay, so we've gone over this with the 120 grit on the sanding beam, and it's looking really, really good now. That is looking perfect there. That is looking perfect there. So 7 1/4 at the first fret, and right at the end of the fretboard is 10 inches. And then just have a quick look down here, and that's looking lovely too. Beautiful. Okay. We go to 240 when you're finishing, so let's use a sanding block, and we'll just give this a good sanding, making sure that we don't take the radius out of it. Okay, that's cool, that'll do. Now we're not going crazy with that because we've actually got to do a couple of stages anyway, which is of course we've got to get the binding on. That is looking awesome there instantly. So get the binding on, and we have to put new fret markers in. These are 1/4 inch inlays. These are nice thick inlays, these ones. Sometimes with the pearl dots, you know, they're like wafer thin. What I'm going to do, because it would be a real pain if I forgot to do this, is I'm going to chisel out the nut slot, because it's going to be much harder to chisel out once we've bound the neck. So let's just get a 3mm chisel and very carefully chisel this guy out. I've now made the nut, and I've notched it out so that it can sort of sit here, and the binding will sit underneath it. Obviously, when the binding's on, we'll have to fit it properly, but that's basically what we've done. So the next job is we're going to stick the binding on. So I'm just going to get a heat gun and sort of melt it a little bit and just sort of work it around there, stick it all on here, and then what you do is you drizzle some really thin super glue in there, and it will stick it. So yeah, the first sort of thing I've got to tackle is this little curve here. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty good. I'm really pleased with how that's looking though, so if this all goes as well as this, that would be nice. So essentially what we do is we just stick some glue down there in all these little gaps here. You know, we're certainly not flooding this, and then once it's kind of stuck, we just come back and sort of glue where the tape is, so that, you know, you fill in the gaps sort of thing. So we're now just knocking back this binding, and I'm saving these shavings, and the reason for that is because we're going to melt them down and make a sort of slurry that you then use to fill any little gaps, like the one that we have at the end of the fretboard where we need to make up some height. So we'll get pretty close, but not all the way, and then we'll sand it. Okay, we are in a very good place here. Fret slots are looking nice, the binding is looking great. I've given that a bit more of a sand down. So I'm just going to work on this transition here. Now we're going to be thrifty and use the frets that I pulled from this, but what we want to do is give ourselves a little bit more width. And so the way that I'm going to do that is, luckily I have a little bit of offcut from this same fret wire. So I'm actually going to put new fret wire in on the last fret. Maybe even I'll put in 2 frets just to be super safe. I think I am going to do that. So we're not going to use frets 1 and 2. We're going to start with fret 3 and go on from there, and then we'll finish up by using this stuff on frets 20 and 21, which are the widest frets, of course. So we've got fret 3 here, and what I want to do is just the tangs have been nipped a little bit for this, but not quite enough, because obviously this was supposed to be up to fret 3 here. Just do a little bit of tang snipping here, and that's looking nice there, and we can just bash that in. And we'll just repeat the whole way up the fretboard basically. So we're just pressing all of these in initially with a 7 1/4 inch caul, which of course is not the final radius of these frets, certainly not the end frets, because they are going up to 10 inches. But what the 7 1/4 inch caul does is pushes those edges down nicely and just gets the frets really well seated on the ends. And then what we can do is go over it with the, it's actually a 9 1/2 inch because I don't have a 10. And that will get the majority of the frets perfectly seated. Next thing I'm going to do is let's drill out these holes here. I'm going to base this guitar neck off my Les Paul actually, which is, I know that might sound really weird, but my Les Paul has this really awesome thin neck, like super thin, thinner in fact by like over 1 millimeter than my American Standard Strat. So I think that'll be really good for sort of small hands. I think it's just super comfortable. So what I've done on this is I've marked out the thickness there at the 1st fret and the thickness there at the 12th fret, and we're just going to connect those lines there and sort of follow it through. And I always like with my guitars to have an even taper from where the nut begins, just there, all the way through to where the body meets the guitar. Let's get this on the bandsaw, give ourselves plenty of wiggle room. We know we don't even want to get within 1 millimeter really of that line, because there's going to be sanding, there's going to be all sorts of stuff. We reduced the thickness of the neck, which is great, and we just need to follow suit with the headstock. Now, this might seem a bit odd, because in most instances, what you do with a Fender headstock is this would basically be completely flat and parallel to the line of the fretboard and largely the back of the neck, albeit the neck tapers. The way that I do this is I tend to try and make as much of the stock as possible. So if I've got enough room to sort of tilt the headstock back slightly without scarfing or anything like that, then that's what I'll do, you know, just to try and sort of increase the headstock angle. Cool. I think that'll be good. Alright, this is one of my favourite bits now. I'm going to get the spoke shave and shape this thing down. Now, I'm just going to mark the center line. This is the other tool I absolutely love, the Shinto rasp. Okay, so I made up some neck profile templates, and what I normally do is get to the first fret and you just fit it so that there's no gaps anymore, and it's really easy to see where the material needs to be removed, because essentially you just remove wherever it's touching there. So one of the key things that I've screwed up frequently in the past, you've got to really keep your mind on, your eye on, is not to touch the binding, because it's only 1.5 mm thick. That's looking pretty good actually. So what I might do now is move on to this guy and just sort of flatten that out a little bit. That's very good. That's really good. Cool. So then we repeat the same process at the 12th fret, and the neck will then be in a really good place to start sort of leveling it out. But that's feeling lovely. I think for a 9-year-old hand, that'll be perfect. We're in a pretty good place with this now. So 12th fret is here, and that is really, really close. First fret is also really close. Awesome. So stage 2 of this is we get a straight edge. We'll have a look there. So that is looking pretty good. There's a bit of a raised area there, so we'll hit that. Lovely, lovely. Bit of a high spot there. So a bit of a high spot here. After we've done that, we get our 120 grit, and you just do this. Business. God, that neck feels amazing. You'd be really mindful here because it's very easy. Oh, that's so good. It's very easy to sort of round it off. We'll now just carve some of this away. Obviously making extra sure we don't sort of carve into the neck at this stage, because we've actually don't really have anything to spare on there. Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, slight change of tack. The frets just weren't good enough. The second-hand frets required too much leveling, and as a result, you know, I was having to lose a load of fret height, and I probably could have got away with it, but the fret job would have been ordinary. It wouldn't have been special. I wouldn't have been proud of it. And in some respects, Thomas is a beginner guitarist, and really he's not going to know the difference between a great fret job and a poor fret job. But on the flip side, if he has a guitar that fights him at that age, it might put him off for life. So I'm just scraping off any residual super glue here. It's looking really nice though. Okay, I'm just going to take the edges off these frets. We're literally just taking the corners off at this stage because the rest of it we'll do when we actually level and crown. But what I want to do is just deal with all the stuff that's going to be in this sort of paint region. All right, that's going to do us. Let's take that through.